Hello and welcome to Black Dog Knits. My name is Delaney and I'm a knitter based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and today I thought I would sit down and record a long overdue knitting podcast, as I haven't recorded one in over a year now. And so I usually follow typical podcast format where I'm going to share with you some of my most recently finished objects of the new year, as well as some of the ongoing projects that I am working on. And then lastly, I do have a couple acquisitions that I'm excited to share with you and the project plans that I have for those acquisitions. And so if any of this sounds interesting to you, please feel free to grab your knitting or a warm drink or whatever will make you cozy, and let's get started. So I'll start out with what I am wearing, which is the Coffee Run Sweater by Kutovakika. This is a pattern that is from her Knits to Wear book, and I love this sweater. It is a simple top-down raglan sweater that features twisted ribbing along the collar, and it continues seamlessly into the raglan seam. And then something that actually isn't shown in the book but that is in the sweater is the ribbing down the side that continues, which I actually love, and found that during the knitting process of this, it actually kept the sweater a bit more engaging. Instead of just doing stockinette and the round and the round and the round, there was some ribbing along the side, which kind of keeps you more engaged and helps the rounds go by a little bit faster. And so I knit this sweater out of Peer Gynt, which is a Norwegian yarn, which I had never used before, but as many of us had heard or do hear about it a lot, I wanted to try it. And so I used the color, I think, Muscat Melange, which is a Petite Knit colorway. And I think I used 9 balls to make this sweater. I will correct that if I am wrong in the description, but it's a sweater that I wear every day, or not every day, but I should say all the time, and that it could be worn pretty much every day, especially on days like today when it's super cold out. It's worn really well, and it's a color that I usually don't gravitate towards, but that I have found really easy to wear. And so that kind of segues nicely into my finished objects, because the first one I want to show you is another Coffee Run sweater, which I actually made for my husband. This is a Coffee Run sweater that I finished very recently. I still actually have to weave in some of the ends, but it is a Coffee Run sweater that I made using Cascade 220 in the color Sparrow, which is a color that he chose. And when I told my husband I wanted to make him a sweater, he brought up the Coffee Run sweater, which I was very proud of him for knowing, but also excited that he had chosen such a simple and classic pattern. And so I took very careful measurements of him and the sweaters that he likes to wear, as well as had him choose the color and everything. And I did a gauge swatch, which I usually don't do. And so I felt really ready to go. And I ended up making him this sweater and had him try it on throughout and everything to make sure it was fitting right. And in the end, unfortunately, what we found was that it actually didn't fit him as well as we had hoped. It ended up being a bit too tight, and the neckline ended up being too wide, and that I tried to put in some elastic thread to tighten it, but really for it to be tight enough for it to fit the way that he felt comfortable in, it wasn't tight enough and would really change the structure of the sweater and its construction. And so it turns out that the sweater is really only a little bit too big for me, so I've decided that I'm just going to keep it instead of frog it and wear it as a nice oversized cozy sweater around the house this winter. And instead what I will do is order some more yarn and make him a different sweater that is actually designed for men. And so I think in the future what I'm going to do is make him, I think it's called Justin's Flannel by Alicia Plummer. And I'm going to use the same yarn as it's a worsted weight pattern to make him that sweater. And I'm hoping that because it's designed, I think, for men in mind, or with men in mind, that the fit will be better, especially around the collar and in the shoulders, where I think in this sweater, I would have done more short rows in the back for him in retrospect. And so I'm taking this not as necessarily a knitting flop, but more as a very thorough learning experience for making a sweater for a man, which I have not done before. So that's my first finished object. My second finished object that I'll show you is one that I'm very excited about and that I've been wearing a lot recently, which is a cable hat by Dora Stephensen. This is a free pattern on Ravelry, and it's an all-over cable hat, as the name would suggest. And to make this, I used Berroco Lanas yarn, which is a worsted weight yarn, and I used the color Lagoon, which has this really nice depth to it. You can see it's got some blues and greens, which I just love, and I found that this was a really fast pattern to knit up. The only modification I made for this was that I made the 2x2 ribbing on the brim a bit longer than what the pattern calls for, and this allows me to fold the brim up and for the fabric around my ears to be a bit warmer, which is really nice on chilly days here in the Northeast. And so I would highly recommend this pattern to anybody who wants to do some cables, who wants to practice cables, who wants to learn cables. It's very easy and goes by relatively quickly. It would make a really good gift knit if you want to make something for someone else. I think I used 80 grams of yarn for this, so it doesn't use a ton of yarn, but if you do have kind of a loose skein of worsted weight yarn that you're not sure what to do with, I do think that this is a very good pattern to put that yarn to use for. So that's my second finished object. And then my third is a basic, but I think classic one, which is one that I think we're all very familiar with. It is the Sophie Scarf, which I'm heavily modified to make very long. And I used for this Cascade 220 in the color Storm Cloud Heather, which was some yarn I had left over from another project. And I wanted to make a nice long cozy scarf for my husband to wear while we walk our dogs. And so in the beginning, what I did was I just weighed the amount of yarn that I had left over, and I just made the scarf until I had, I continued doing increases until I had about 50% of the yarn left over, and then I began doing decreases. And as you can see, with this being an all over garter stitch scarf, this is very straightforward and kind of mindless, although I will say that the number of rows between increase or decrease rounds does keep you a bit more engaged. And I actually found I kind of created a game for myself where I was doing, I was trying to do some exercises between rows where I was increasing or decreasing. So I would do like 10 rows and then I would go and do something, and then I would come back and I'd do another 10 rows, and it was good to keep both things going along to keep me motivated in both areas. But because this is a garter stitch scarf, I found that when I blocked it, it actually ended up growing a fair amount. And this is over 6 feet tall, so it's perfect for wrapping around your neck several times. And you can even kind of wear it as a hood. I don't think it's quite deep enough for a hood, but you can kind of wear it as a hood if you really want to, which is also extra cozy and nice. So maybe one day I'll make a real hood, but it's also an option if you want some extra coverage around the sides of your face. So anyways, this is the Sophie Scarf / hood. Let's see, other things about this pattern. I will say I've made this pattern before. I used some leftover yarn for another project, and I found it really boring to make the first time, in all honesty, and thought that it was really tedious, and I was like, why did I pay for this pattern? But then after I did that pattern and made this several years later, I actually grew to really appreciate this pattern for its versatility and what you can use it for, and that you can really use any yarn and any amount of yarn to make it, and it can really become whatever you want it to. So I do appreciate the pattern for that. It's not groundbreaking, but it is, I think, a very classic and easy thing to have on your needles to go and watch TV or whatever, talk to people while you're making it. So I do actually highly recommend this pattern as either something for yourself, something quick, or something that you can make as a gift for other people. And the nice thing is that when you have a scarf, the size doesn't really matter as long as it's long enough. So you don't really have to worry about fit issues if you're giving it to somebody else. Okay, my fourth finished object is my favorite, which I will show you now. This is a Moby Sweater Mini by Petite Knit, and I made this sweater using the new Brava Baby DK yarn, and this is for a baby who we have on the way. And I decided after the Christmas season was over that the Christmas knitting season should not be, so I decided to make the baby his Christmas sweater in January. And as you can see, as many of us are familiar with, the Moby sweater features this lattice kind of faux cable pattern on the front, and then has these really classic cables along the side and some really cute little cables down the sleeve, making it a very engaging knit and also just so adorable when it's so tiny. So the color of the Brava Baby is maroon, and then to make the what I consider trim, but the cuffs and the neckline, I used Berroco Vintage Baby. And that was kind of a last minute change. I saw that I had some white yarn and thought that it would be cute. And so this has become now the Santa Baby sweater. That's what I call it. And so Petite Knit, as many of us are familiar with, has many different kind of, I would say, flavors of patterns. And so for the Moby sweater, she has patterns ranging from baby to mini to junior to adult men and adult women. And so for this one, I bought the mini pattern because I figured that once he grows out of this, I can still make more for him without having to purchase another pattern. And I do think for myself and my husband, I will purchase one of the adult patterns just so I can make sure I have all the numbers and sizes correct, but I don't think I'll purchase both the men's and the women's. I'll probably just adjust accordingly. But yeah, I'm really excited and hoping that I'll be able to make some matching Moby sweaters for us at one point, sometime. So those are the finished objects of 2026 that I have so far. And so now what I'll do is take you through some of my works in progress. The first work in progress that I will show you is actually one that's long-standing and that I'm bringing in from 2025, which is my Turtle Dove Pullover by Sari Nordlund. I'll show it to you here. This is the Turtle Dove Pullover, which is an all-over raglan style cable sweater that features these really pretty cables. This is my favorite part, actually, is these cables down here. And just kind of the movement of these cables with the baubles, I think, is really pretty and kind of what drew me to the sweater initially when I saw it. And so I actually bought this pattern as soon as it was released. And I had the yarn to make it. I'm using Knitting for Olive Bordeaux, as well as Isager soft silk mohair in the color mulberry. And I love this combination. It's just so light and fluffy. And I think it still shows the cables really nicely. It doesn't hide the cables too much. And I think this color has become really popular recently. And so as I was making this, I realized that I may not have enough of the silk mohair. And so when I started the first sleeve, I actually weighed the amount of mohair, and then I measured how much I would need for a sleeve to see if I would have enough, one, to finish the collar as well as the other sleeve. And not to my surprise, it turns out that I did not have enough. And so I actually ordered another ball of it, but I think because it's been in such popular demand, the mohair hasn't come in yet, and it's been over a month, so I actually just recently checked in about that. But because of that, I kind of lost steam on making progress on the other sleeve, but that's something that I have on my to-do list for something when I want a little bit more of an engaging knit to work on. Now, my other work in progress that I've been working on recently is a far simpler sweater, which is the Stockholm Sweater by Petite Knit. And this is a DK weight sweater that many of us are familiar with. I think it's one of her earlier patterns. It's a drop shoulder sweater, and it's a very simple design where you start off literally just making a rectangle in the back, and then the shaping actually happens in the shoulders and the front. So you shape to make both the neckline as well as the shoulders, and then the sleeves will also have some short row shaping. And I've made this pattern once before, and I really liked the way that it fit, although I did make it a bit shorter than what I like. And so I wanted to have another staple stockinette sweater that I could throw on for cozy days in the winter. So I decided to use this yarn that I had in stash, which is Juniper Moon Farms Herriot, which is a 100% baby alpaca yarn. And then I'm also holding it with the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the color petroleum green. And besides from just the fluff factor, I decided to hold these two yarns together because alpaca does tend to be very drapey and not hold its structure very well. And so I'm hoping that by holding it with the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair that the structure will be a bit better. And the pattern calls for knitting this with 2 strands of lace weight yarn, so it tends to be more open gauge than what I'm knitting it at, but because of the alpaca, I decided that I would keep the same needles that it calls for, 4mm needles, and just knit it at a denser gauge so that it would be nice and warm, fluffy, and also not lose its structure too much. But this is really soft, and I'm hoping that it holds up well. I've heard mixed things about using alpaca for garments, and so it's kind of a risk, but I'm willing to take it because I just love this color, and it's so soft, and it'll be really nice and warm for the winter. So that is, those are the two works in progress that I have going right now. And then I should move into the acquisitions that I have. First acquisition that I'll show you is kind of boring, but that's okay. It's some gray yarn that I got. This is Cascade 220 in the color silver gray, I believe. And this is just a workhorse yarn that many of us are familiar with. It's very easy to get in the States, and if you order it from Webs, if you order a certain amount, you can get a pretty good discount. And so I actually ordered this with the yarn that I ordered for my husband's sweater, was able to get a good discount, and I was dithering on what I wanted to make this, or I wanted to make out of this, and I think I've decided that I want to make a terrazzo sweater, which is one that I've made in the past, but I actually made 2 of them in the past. I made one in a cream color, which I really like, but because I have 2 black dogs, it's really difficult to wear the color cream. And so even though I like that sweater, I don't wear it very much because I'm always worried about getting it dirty. And then I made another gray one a while ago out of acrylic yarn, which I like too, and I modified that one to have a crew neck. But this one, I really like the turtleneck aspect of the other one, and so I'm going to make another turtleneck. And I find that this yarn is not too scratchy for me, so I think that using this yarn will be nice and soft and really warm for cold days. Again, you can see that there's a theme of wanting cozy, simple sweaters for cold days. So that is my plan with this. For Christmas this year, I asked for some Knitting for Olive yarn, and so I got this color Dove Blue in the heavy merino, and this is such a pretty color. It actually doesn't come in their merino, it only comes in their heavy merino. I'd seen this color when the Knit Pearl girl was showing her Guinevere, I think that's how you pronounce it, sweater, and I just fell in love with the color, and actually went to the store and looked at this color, compared it to some of the other blues that Knitting for Olive has, and I really was set on this one, and I couldn't find anything that compared to it online in terms of other brands, and so I was very set on getting this specific color for this project I have in mind. And then to be extra fancy, I decided to order some dusty blue or dusty Dove Blue soft silk mohair, so I'm going to hold these 2 together. And with these yarns, what I'm planning on making is the Wishbone sweater by Kutovakika, which is an all-over cable sweater. I don't think it's technically a turtleneck. I think it might be a mock neck sweater. But I bought this pattern during her 2024 Advent sale, and I have yet to make it, but I think these blues will make a really nice and soft, cozy, wintry sweater for years to come. So that's something that I have planned for those. And so those are kind of the projects that I'm working on. I also have some other baby knits that I want to work on, but I haven't really set my mind on what specifically I'm going to do. So that's kind of what I was planning on sharing with you today, but I hope that you enjoyed this podcast and that whatever you were working on, you were able to make some progress on, that you've been having a good start to your new year, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to record another podcast somewhat soon, hopefully not after another year, and that you have a good rest of your day. So I'll wish you happy knitting for now, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.